let's briefly, we're a little bit. I appreciate you're hanging with me here. So we go through this, and really, in many respects, Sanders starts his campaign as an issue campaign. He does much better than he thought that he would, it seems to me, and it seems like somewhere around January of 2017 or 2018 or 16, he realizes like I could win this, but it's basically too late in many respects.
Right.
For him to, you needed to go back in time and have had laid some groundwork for, because winning a campaign is extremely difficult. But what comes out of this is a huge mass of energy that gets dispersed into different organizations and different techniques of raising money. And it shows that someone can go and raise money without having to have corporate interests. And let's just tell us a story about the Justice Dems, which came out of, which is like a third generation or second generation sort of Sanders people, and what decision they made that ultimately proved to be the right one.
Yeah, and what was cool about this crew is that a normal campaign wouldn't have hired really any of them for the most part. But the Sanders campaign, and Becky Bond, who's one of them, talked to me about this, said that they had a real hard time hiring professional campaigners and consultants because anybody who worked for the Sanders campaign was going to be blacklisted. A Clinton-dominated party going forward. Jeff Weaver came out of, he had gone to run a comic book shop, retired from politics, and came back to run the campaign. And then this crew that gets into what they end up calling distributed organizing, which is basically taking the Sanders volunteer army and putting them to work doing, door knocking, text messaging, house parties, and turning all that energy into voter contacts. That team is people like Becky Bond and Zach Exley. Both Zach in particular was influential in the Dean campaign. So, like you said, like a lot of the very same people who were involved in the beginning are still doing a lot of this today. Then you had Corbin Trent, who was a food truck operator in Tennessee. And you had Shroykot Chakrabarty, who left Silicon Valley. He was an engineer at Stripe, payment processor. He becomes like an engineer for this team. And then you had movement people like Zach Mallitz and Claire Sandberg, who like come out of Occupy, anti-globalization movement, not the kind of up the typical like work for a state legislative campaign, then a congressional campaign, then a Senate campaign, then a presidential. And so because of that, they all thought very differently about how to organize a campaign. And they really had only figured it out, like you said, by January. Something like 85 to 90% of the voter contacts that their operation made, and they made millions, tens of millions, came after January. So kind of too late for it to work. But in 2016, then as the campaign is winding down, they go out and they form this new group that they call Brand New Congress, where they're trying to elect 435 new members. And they go to Cenk Uygur and they say, hey, you think TYT would want to, or the TYT viewers would want to support something like this? And he's like, this idea that you're going to run Bernie-style candidates in Republican primaries is nice, but it's crazy because, yes, the economic populism works with Republican voters, but they'd have to be anti-choice, they'd have to be anti-gay. Like we're not supporting candidates like that. That's not going to work. That's crazy. He's like, now the Democrats, all right, that could work. And so they say, well, what if we split it up? And so they carved the Democrats out and called them Justice Democrats. And Cenk said, okay, that we can get behind. And so he promoted them heavily on TYT and TYT
Kyle
viewers.
Kalinske as well got involved in that as well.
Yeah, huge. And they pumped more than $2 million to get them off the ground. And then their idea that they were going to run these candidates in every district, didn't pan out. They wound up with several dozen. And then those several dozen, most of them were struggling. And so they pivoted at the end, said, let's pick one and go all in. And they picked Ocasio-Cortez. And then she, remained loyal to a lot of to the idea. And so, her victory speech that night, she talked about Ayanna Pressley and Cori Bush. And so they ended up winning Ayanna Pressley. Cori Bush, they did not. And so they going for 435, I guess they wound up with a couple. They had also gotten in behind people like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar in blue districts. But yeah, so this was, without the Sanders campaign, you absolutely do not get a brand new Congress or Justice Democrats, and you don't get Ocasio-Cortez, who of course herself was
in many respects, that ends up being a very smart decision, right? I mean, to get her in ends up having, that's a pound for pound. That ends up being
an exponential win there. Yeah.
So ultimately, where do you anticipate things going right now? I mean, because the idea is, and I know that you've described this as aspirational, the end of big money. And I heard you talk at a book talk, and if anybody has the opportunity to go see it, it's a don't miss book talk, I should say. But where does that lead now? Because we've got Joe Biden does not represent that, right? And we have many of the candidates who are struggling, who started off like, I'm not going to take any.
Does.
Or well,
like maybe he is the end of big money. I mean, think about it. Imagine you're the donor class, and you've already lost control of the Trump wing of the Republican Party, and you're clinging to your relevance in the Democratic Party, and the man that you're putting out onto the field of battle in this climactic final clash between the donor class and regular activists, your horse is Joe Biden. There's something symbolic in that. Like it's representative of the weak position that the donor class finds itself in. That this is who they're going to ride into the final battle. But like you said, like if Democratic voters decide that he's the electable one and that he's the smart choice to beat Trump, then it will be less the big money and more that punditry that voters engage in that will put him over the top. I think the only way that he's stopped is if voters decide that actually he's not electable, that he's a lousy campaigner, that he can't take a political punch, and that Trump would actually manhandle him in the general election. If voters decide that, then I think they start looking at some other options.
How much are, and we're sort of pivoting off of the book a little bit here, but how much are the campaigns, like, I mean, sir, there was obviously a push the past week or two. It's hard to know which of these campaigns are out there sort of like actively making life miserable for Joe Biden. But I got to imagine that, last week I think was, the worst week that Joe Biden has had politically since he basically was picked by Barack Obama to be his running mate. It was where he, had to reverse a position that he had held for 40 years after 2 days of criticism say like, well, it was because of the Republican, it was a pretty lame cover story.
And actually a piece of the book rocked him back a little bit too. There was I pulled up a few quotes from him in the 70s, talking about, I'm not responsible for what my ancestors did 300 years ago. This is, it's not the white man's problem to he shouldn't have to give anything up because of what happened so long in the past. And then he said that the two-party system is clearly going to be good for the Negro in the South,
right?
Which is this is after the Southern strategy. Like Nixon was already employing the Southern. The second party's strategy was to be more racist than the current party, and so that was a skeptical. No, that was a dubious claim to make at the time, and has not been borne out at all. And so then, that kind of started him off, and then he followed up with this Hyde Amendment faceplant, which like that should, like, if you're the electable guy, you've got to show that you're good at getting elected.
Well, that is like the meta story, right? Because with him, it's all the meta story. And so every time he backs off a position, it shows weakness. Like there hasn't been another candidate, as far as I know, that has had to back off a position yet, or at least so publicly anyways. And he had to do that because it suggested that he had some weakness. And when that starts to come out, it becomes self-perpetuating, I think.
Right, and if he loses, let's say he loses in Iowa, that is worse for him than it is for anybody else.
Right.
Because, like you said, like his whole thing is that he's a winner, and he should win the nomination because he's a winner and he will beat Trump. But if you don't win in Iowa and you don't have anything else, then it starts to fall in on itself.